Welcome to the session. This is called the NSX Practical Path. And my name is Brian Lazier, and I'm on the NSX product management team. And I'm pleased to invite, as part of this talk, one of our customers, another Brian from Africa. And this is Brian Guida, and I'll let you introduce yourself. Thanks for being here as part of this.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Muita. I'm the CTO at Node Africa. We're a Nairobi-based cloud services company. We've been an NSX customer from the very start, and I'm very excited to be sharing, albeit briefly, our experiences using the product.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
So throughout my talk, we'll have Q&A, where I'll be asking Brian about his experiences, what he's using NSX for, and it'll give you a sense for how you can apply NSX to different use cases. Disclaimer slide. I don't plan to talk about too much roadmap here, but I have to show this to you. And our goal here will be to discuss the different use cases of NSX. We'll go into some depth as to what some of the detail components are of the use cases. And then when we were talking with Brian here, we'll learn more about how he's actually applied it directly to his environment. Here's today's agenda. Let's start with NSX today. What are we going after? And our focus, like a lot of you, is on the application. And that's what we do as a company, where we virtualize it. And if you look at the goals of applications, they haven't changed much. You want to get them up and running very, very quickly. You want to reduce the speed, or reduce the amount of time between creation and security and pen testing and have it in production. You want it to be very secured. And then lastly, you want it to be available. And this means resilient, it means accessible from anywhere, in cloud environments, data center environments, and down to the end devices themselves. The challenge with this, though, is that if you look at the change state, there's quite a bit. Of course, the threat landscape continues to evolve. There's always an attack, it seems like, every day, and they're more sophisticated. The architecture of the applications are changing. You've gone from bare metal physical, you have moved into virtual. Maybe some of you are using containers and microservices now. So the structures are changing. And then the infrastructure. You have metro pooling, you have converged environments, you have PaaS, you are maybe in public cloud now. So the application is getting subjected to a lot of change. What we do with NSX is that we strive to drive this digital transformation. And fundamentally, it's about using the compute for networking and security, like full stack functions, routing, switching, layer 4 firewalling, service insertion with advanced firewall that we have with partners like a Palo Alto or Checkpoint or Fortinet. And we achieve this by being infrastructure independent, which means that we're running on general purpose compute. And you can use that now for your horsepower, for memory, for CPU, to run these network and security services. We also apply security, and that is to the VM level. Now with our announcements with container, we're supporting container security. So it can be very fine-grained controls, and I'll talk more about the use cases around security. Then lastly, it's about that ability to stretch it, to be able to apply it to different environments. Multi-hypervisor support, different data center environments, including public cloud. So being able to apply it across. Currently, we have about 2,600 customers. We're growing very quickly. We've basically doubled year over year in terms of the number of customers. We also have a lot of deployments in production. This is basically tripled year over year. So it's being acquired by customers, and also they're shifting and putting it into the production environments. And then lastly, we train a lot. We're focusing on, as part of the enablement of digital transformation, is educating. Hopefully, did some of you go to HOL this week for NSX? Any HOL users or participants? So we love to train and certify folks, and we're close to 9,000 people now. In terms of where, what kinds of customers are using NSX, we see it in basically every vertical out there. We're in carriers, we're in healthcare and financial services, we're in technology and public sector, education, retail, travel, transport. It's the gamut. It applies to almost every environment out there. And throughout the week, you probably saw customers up on stage talking about their experiences with NSX. And here's a good snapshot of publicly referenced customers in these respective verticals. So it's achieved very good traction in a very short period of time. NSX has been out in the market for about 4 years or so. So it's been picked up very quickly and applied to significant environments, very, very large data centers in some cases, large deployments of virtual desktop. So it's being applied to significant workload environments. So this is a slide that we use quite a bit when we give presentations on NSX. This gives you a good visual about the different use cases. In our talk today, we'll be going into great detail on the respective kind of key components of this: security, automation, and application continuity. These are the primary pillars, and then within them, there are specific examples, specific use cases that you can apply. What's great about NSX is that it's a platform, and it's a solution. And when I see customers a lot, and when I have seen them, say, a couple of years ago, we'll have cases where they have one use case that they've started with. Maybe they started with microsegmentation or disaster recovery. And then as I go back and see them again, they've applied it to more environments. They may have 3 or 4 of these now that they're fulfilling. So it gives you a tremendous amount of value to start with a particular area and then continue to develop it out over time. I also like to share how within our engineering walls, back in Palo Alto where I work, our development team is very familiar with these. It's how we develop. It's how we focus on getting the value of NSX. And the engineering team knows these. And when we build things together, we know which area that we're attacking. So it's a good set of use cases. These are also dynamic. We added the cross cloud on the bottom right last year because we announced our support for VMC on AWS, as well as support for SoftLayer, IBM, and we have the vCAN partners. So cross cloud became one of our new use cases. So how do you get started with NSX, and what's involved? Here's a couple of simple steps that we've put together. The first thing you do is you deploy. You deploy NSX. There's easy ways to do it. In this case, we're showing how you could deploy an OVF template. So this can be a wizard model. It gets you up and running very, very quickly. You register with vCenter, which is interesting. If you don't know, NSX is tightly coupled to vCenter. It's actually inside the user interface. You'll see that NSX is part of that. And that's a big value we have because we get attributes and other information from vCenter when you're applying, say, security policy. We're a 3-tier model, meaning that you you deploy NSX into the clusters in step 4. That's data plane. And we have controllers, which is the step 3. And then we have what's called an NSX manager. So the controllers are deployed in the 3rd step. And we support up to 3. You can do resiliency with a 3-node cluster for controllers. And then once you prep the clusters, you apply NSX to the hypervisor itself. It's in kernel. Then you can go move into configuring and deploying. And we are also showing here how you can use what's called the Edge Services Gateway. The Edge Services Gateway is it's a VM appliance. And this is also part of NSX, where it connects to the outside, to the physical. The Edge Service Gateway is very feature-rich. It has dynamic routing. It has layer 4 firewalling as well. It has the VPN capabilities for SSL and IPsec. And the ESG also has our load balancing capabilities. So fairly straightforward, a 5-step process. Those that have deployed, if they focus on a particular application and get it up and running, this doesn't take very long. It's fairly straightforward, and particularly if you're very familiar with vCenter. Okay, so I'm going to talk to Brian for a second. And I have a slide of your hometown. I believe may not be the best picture, but yeah, I tried to do that.
Yeah, that's downtown Nairobi.
So maybe you can describe, what are you providing your customers? What is the role of Node Africa?
So Node Africa we are a managed cloud services company. So what that means is that our infrastructure is built on VMware. We're a VMware service provider, and our mission is mainly to help our customers on the journey to the cloud. And our bigger vision is to make Africa a cloud-first continent.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And maybe you can describe what VMware products you use in your environment.
So right now everything, the hypervisor is VC, of course. Yes. We have NSX. Our entire networking is built on, the network layer is built on NSX. We provide automation using vCloud Director. So we give our customers virtual data centers in which they can deploy their workloads.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. And what's the typical customer profile that you guys support?
Our customer base is actually quite varied. It ranges from retail to manufacturing to the financial services sector. Different risk profiles and security needs, with the highest being in the security sector.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then maybe you could explain how it was for you to get NSX up and running.
Okay.
Smiley face, not so smiley face, but I mean, describe your experience.
It was a very big smiley face.
Okay.
So the Node Africa origin story is actually an interesting one. We had to launch within a 6-week period with hardly any budget. So we hardly had any resources for any fancy networking gear. And looking at NSX, we realized it can actually fulfill most of the needs we needed most of the networking needs we needed to deploy internally for ourselves and also to give services to our customers. So we just deployed, we just got basic layer 2 switches. We have a flat network, and we followed the process you talked about. You just deploy the NSX manager, and then the rest of the steps are just followed in the vCenter. You deploy the controllers and prepare the clusters, and that's it. Right. I think it took at most 30 minutes.
Okay, I didn't expect that answer. Okay, yeah. So 30 minutes, that's not so bad. Yeah. All right, good.
Yeah.
Cool, okay. Thank you. We'll come back in a minute. We'll talk some more about...
Okay.
So let's talk about security. We focus on two sides of the equation, the endpoints and the application itself. We focus on users and the devices. For example, we have virtual desktop that we support. We also support integration with our AirWatch client. And then on the application side, it's about securing from a user perspective, the data, the network side, and the compute itself. So there's a lot of power, a lot of flexibility within NSX for security. One of our top use cases is microsegmentation. And this is where the distributed firewall is a big part of this. It's running in the kernel, layer 4 firewall, very high performing. On a basic kind of 1RU server, you can get about 20 gig of layer 4 protection with DFW. So it's also certified. We went through ICSA to get our certification for the corporate standard for firewall. So it's a very real layer 4 firewall. And it also allows you to build your rule sets and policy around key constructs, beyond just MAC and port sets and IPs, but you can actually use it with VM attributes, meaning how things are defined in the application side in vCenter, like your OS type, your VM name, tags, those can all be applied to how you create security groups. So it allows you to have an abstraction from the network side. And in terms of securing end user, we support the gamut of VDI vendors. And we also even have features that refer to as ID firewall or identification firewall. So you can authenticate the user as it comes into the workload, where we tie into the Active Directory authentication side. And we also have what's called guest introspection features. And this is where you can include partners of ours, the antivirus and anti-malware partners, and they can run as a service VM. It's a centralized instance of AV or AM, and it can do scanning to the multiple VMs in a single host. So you don't have to apply an agent for every single VM. So this has been a really good capability for us, but also allows our partners to get into the virtual compute layer with ease. And then lastly, the DMZ Anywhere. This has been great for us for some compliance use cases. You can, basically within any security group, with any workload, you can do isolation. And then on top of that, with guest introspection, to include inline partners here. So you can have a next-gen firewall, an IPS, intrusion prevention services appliance, and we can do redirects to that. So you're in NSX on a flow basis. You can redirect to that appliance sitting inside of that host. So you can have next level security protection around application identification, IPS, and the whole UTM suite. So it's a strong set of capabilities. So how do you get started with NSX security? How many are familiar with vRealized Network Insight, or have heard of it before? Yeah, this is a fairly recent acquisition for us of a company called Arkin. But vRealized Network Insight, or VRNI, gives you visibility. And it gives you visibility at a grand scale. So you can see the entirety of your data center. You can see all the flows between VMs. And this visibility is very key, particularly when you start getting into doing microsegmentation, because you want to know what you're dealing with. You want to know the kinds of flows that you have, and it allows you to start to mitigate your rule sets and your policy so that you can get your application up and running. So we have pre-assessment capabilities today, where you can use a version of it to analyze your environment, and then as a product, you can apply it on a regular basis. You obviously deploy NSX into the host, similar to just the general getting started, and then you create rules, and these are the distributed firewall rules. And then there's a feature called Application Rule Manager. This is the step 4. This is a fairly recent feature. This came out in NSX 6.3, which was around February of this year. And Application Rule Manager allows you to do spot checks. It's more of an application view versus VRNI is the entirety of your data center view. You can go in, you can select VMs, and you can run analysis of all the flows across the VNIC of those respective VMs that you choose. And the app rule manager allows you to select the flow that it sees, and if there's no rule, you can actually click model. You can select the flow, click a rule, and it inserts it automatically into your rule table. So it gives you that visibility, but also a way to quickly create rules and kind of button up your application so that it's ready to go to production. And if you're interested in that, there's actually some really good blogs we did a few months ago and some good YouTube videos that demonstrates the application rule manager tool. I will note that there will be some additional work in this where it'll start providing more of a recommendation view. So we'll be doing some basic learning of the data so that it helps you determine what rules you want to apply. So again, the whole idea is to get you into production as fast as possible with applications. And then lastly, it's around being able to monitor. And this is kind of the recursive piece. You're continuously, double checking your application. You're auditing it. You may have a change state like a patch or an upgrade, and it requires you to kind of loop back through. And that's the idea. And you have the tools to do that for you. Okay. Another slide for you guys. This is a real place too, right? I assume you recognize that one.
Looks familiar. I haven't been there, but my colleague, Faraz, I think, knows what it is.
Yeah, but apparently you can actually stay there and they come in your place.
The animals just come right up to you as you're having a breakfast.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So I know that you're starting to move into security as a use case. You're not quite there, but you're planning to eventually. Maybe you could describe what your goals are. What sort of things do you want to do with the security functions?
So like I mentioned earlier, one of the tools we're using for automation is vCloud Director. Yeah. So until Director 8.2, microsegmentation wasn't exposed to the end user. So that left us with only two options. In most cases, we were doing security on the perimeter, just using the edge gateways only. Or in very rare and unique cases, we'll actually log into the vCenter directly and apply the distributed file rules for the customer. But we'll shun that because it's not a maintainable model. So we're currently expanding into a second data center in the city called Mombasa. And then we're going to deploy the new version of Director 8.2. And this will allow the customers to be able to define their own rules on the distributed firewall. And then later on, when you're doing data center pooling and the rest, a VM will be able to move with the security policy, regardless of where it is, from data center to data center without any intervention.
Very good.
From the end user.
And what are the things that your customers want? I think maybe some compliance use cases or...
Yeah, by far the most common, the key driver across the board is compliance. So more so, especially in the financial services sector and what has been happening in the industry recently. Yeah. So in the region, we have had new cybersecurity regulations come in, and all our customers are expected to demonstrate compliance from the get-go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
And what's your time frame? When do you think you'll start shifting to security?
Oh, that's actually starting next month.
Oh, next month. Okay.
Yeah, we're building the new data center, so it's actually an immediate need.
Okay. Very good. And is this something you plan to provide to all your customer sets?
Yes. This is it's going to be a key value add.
Okay.
That goes out to the customers. Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah. Then maybe the other thing I could talk about is the app rule manager. So that's actually going to be an operational godsend to the operational teams, because right now it's just trying to figure out what rules to put in and how to deploy them is a manual error-prone process. Mm-hmm. And this basically just automates that entire life cycle for you. So
yeah. Very good.
It's going to be awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks, Brian.
All right.
He moves so fast, I thought he would be done in 30 minutes with security. But you have next month, so that's not so bad. Okay. All right, so let's talk about this next pillar, which is the application continuity. And this is comprised of the first one, disaster recovery. This is actually one of our top use cases. This is the ability to have cross vCenter support. A typical use case here is like an active backup. You've got an instance of NSX and vCenter in one site, and you replicate it across the other site. And we do things like synchronization of the groups that you create with an NSX manager at active, tags, and other things. So you basically have this very large, high availability use case for disaster recovery. We also support multi-data center pooling. This allows you more of an active-active use case. And then lastly, the cross-cloud. If you're familiar with our cloud story with NSX, there's basically two components to it. One of them is around the AWS, VMC on AWS, where you can run the full software-defined data center stack inside of Amazon. And that's what we announced last year. And Pat, in day one of this week, talked about it again. And this is now generally available. And this allows your applications to be structured the way you do it in a private data center. Your developers can continuously use the different environments of private data center or cloud without having to change anything, because you're using the software-defined data center stack inside of Amazon, and it's a service from us. So we are responsible for setting it up for you. We are responsible for testing it, doing interop, the lifecycle management, and you get the management that you're used to. You still get vCenter and NSX Manager and vSAN Manager. So it's a very simple model to take advantage of the resources of a public cloud environment. The other one that's part of cross-cloud, it's part of our cloud initiative, is called NSX Cloud. And that was also mentioned last year. It was mentioned again this week. So NSX Cloud, it's think of it as being that it's cloud native. So your application developers can run their applications natively into, initially we're supporting Amazon, and that would be within the AMI itself. And NSX goes inside the AMI with an open vSwitch layer. And so it allows you to have the controls you're used to, but it allows your application developers to use a cloud native model for development. So how do you get started with application continuity? This is again, another 5-step model we chose, but the first one is around the deploy. So similar from the previous use cases. In this model, you're deploying what's called universal controllers. And this allows you to span across multiple sites. And we support a three cluster node if you chose to do that for resiliency. And you deploy a second NSX manager, particularly for the cases where you're doing, say, disaster recovery or metro pooling where you have multiple sites. And then you have universal objects. And this is the ability to have switches, routers, firewall rules that can stretch across to different environments, physical environments. And then finally, you can configure the edge services gateway. And that provides you that virtual to physical connection to the flow path. We have a customer reference here. This is the Marriott International, the hotel chain. And Alan has had a lot of success with NSX. And in his case, he's been looking at our cloud story to be able to stretch across. Excuse me, go back. So they're a multi-site environment. They also do disaster recovery. And in this case, it just allows him the ability to really span his data center, either within disaster recovery, but also within public cloud. All right, let's talk again.
That's good.
So I saw this. So this is actually where I think the Lion King was based off of, this rock, right?
I'm not sure about Lion King, but yeah, it's a famous park, Hell's Gate National Park. It's a active volcanic area. So there are lots of geysers, and it's a nice hiking trail.
It's called Hell's Gate.
Yes.
Sounds intimidating.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah.
So maybe tell us about what you've been doing with application continuity.
So in terms of application continuity, one of the products we offer our customers is disaster recovery as a service.
Okay.
And in our case, most of the time it actually ends up being cross-cloud. So you'll find cross-cloud in the sense that we're going to be going to do DR to another VCAM provider. We're going to be providing DR to an on-premise environment. So for that, we've actually been utilizing the L2 VPNs on the edge gateways, just to provide the connectivity between the two sides for that. And also for customers who want to extend their on-premise environments to the cloud, they don't have budget to expand. They don't have budget to expand the infrastructure. They can just lease extra capacity from us, and the same thing we're doing there, just extending by L2 VPNs and so on. Okay. Then also we have had use cases for using the SSL VPN. For now, when customers want to work off the recovery site in case of a disaster, they'll go to the recovery site office, and they'll be able to access the workloads of the L3 VPNs.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
In public cloud, what's your plan? What's your strategy for public cloud?
Right now, our strategy is mainly private, hybrid, and hybrid. We don't have a strategy on public cloud at the moment.
So things go well enough for you within your private data centers, and you're fine for now?
Yeah, so far so good.
But you could choose to do that when you're ready, I guess?
Yeah, definitely.
All good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Brian.
Good.
All right, so we'll move on to NSX for automation. This is the last kind of use case pillar, and this is a very high value one because it's all about speed here. The first one is IT automating IT. We have a lot of tools with just the API in general and scripting. So the NSX Manager, which is your interface for managing everything, it's all API driven. And in fact, I'd say probably half our customers use all API, and about the other half are using the interface, the NSX Manager UI. There's also intelligence that we provide for tools like vRealize automation, and this allows you to do things like templates, and you can even do it at a full network level. You can create blueprints for applications, and you can apply a load balancer to that, and then you can just deploy. You can save those as a profile, and you can basically create your entire data center with automation with VRA. In terms of the developer cloud, we've been supporting OpenStack for a while. We also have VIO support for this. And then important in the developer cloud environment is container support. And we also tie into the CMP of the containers. And with our announcements this week, we support Pivotal Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes. So this is instrumental for the developer environments. And lastly, around multi-tenant infrastructure, this is where tools, actually Brian mentioned VCD, the vCloud Director, and this is where OpenStack can also help. I was mentioning that in terms of the management plane, we have a UI-based workflow, very simple kind of graphical user interface. And I'll make note that we're investing into HTML5 for this interface, so you'll start to see this get significantly better and faster and more intuitive. So we do a lot of work to improve the user experience. API-driven, there's a lot of programmability in NSX. In fact, our security partners use this quite a bit. Like in the case of some of the next-gen firewall partners, they actually use their interface for everything. So like a Panorama from Palo Alto or R80 from Checkpoint, they'll do API calls from that management interface into NSX, and they can create groups, they can create rules. So it's a very valuable way to connect in. And lastly, the CMP, the cloud management platform. As we are getting into cloud, we're supporting multiple clouds. Being able to pick up the important aspects for network and security has been important for us. And this is a customer reference, Amadeus, very large customer that deals with travel, but they've been very happy with how we support containers for them. They're an OpenStack use case. They deploy containers within VMs, within bare metal. And you can read what Wolfgang, what his experience has been like. Okay, another cool looking slide.
Yeah.
Do you recognize that spot?
It looks like the Nairobi National Park.
Yeah.
That's Nairobi National Park.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Nairobi is the only city to have a national park within its limits and the associated challenges. So at the time, the cases where the lions have escaped.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you pass lions in the morning rush hour traffic, and it's quite a sight.
So you're driving to work and you see a lion.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, maybe not.
No, not if you're walking. Yeah.
Oh, great. So maybe you could describe your experiences with the automation side.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, for cloud management, we're using vCloud Director, and vCloud Director integrates with NSX.
Yeah.
So it's a multi-tenant environment in which all the customers are completely isolated from each other. Mm-hmm. So the customers are able to deploy the VMs in isolated networks, which are basically NSX logical switches. Mm-hmm. They can deploy edge gateways, they can configure all the layer 2 VPNs, they can configure layer 3 VPNs. And in the new version of Director 8.2, they actually expose a distributed firewalling to the customer.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. So you're multi-tenant, and in some cases you allow the customer to control everything.
Yeah, so in that environment, the customer gets access to the portal. They have full control of the environment. They can configure all the rules, all their policies, and manage all their workloads. Okay. Yeah.
Very nice. And this is also consistent with large customers where the IT department can be a provider and have a similar model. In this case, you're going to customers directly, but in a large organization, we see that where you can provide controls to the specific network and security teams for their areas, their applications.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something. We also have a dedicated line of product it's still the same. It's still the same portal. They still have access to their own cloud portal, and they just manage all their stuff.
Very good. Do you have any new projects that's coming up with automation?
Yeah, this is actually, so what we're finding especially is in the financial services sector, the customers, just for compliance mainly, they look to have their own dedicated infrastructure. They're not going to, the auditors are not going to let them sit on a shared environment. Yeah. So in that model, what we're doing is we're going full HCI. So it's vSphere, vSAN, NSX, just going fully software defined, just mainly for the benefits. It's cheaper, it's faster, and gives us a lot of flexibility.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, what's next for NSX? We have lots of places that we can be deployed. The one in the bottom left, the private data center, this is probably one of our kind of the most of our businesses here within the private data center. And we are hypervisor agnostic. We support, of course, ESXi, but also KVM. The end user side I mentioned, we support different kinds of VDI technology. We support mobile devices with our partnership with AirWatch. And then on the application framework, we're now supporting PCF with the PKS announcement. Cloud, I mentioned our two kind of big ones we announced last year, and we continue to drive to market with NSX Cloud, as also the VMC on AWS. But then we also support vCAN partners. Over time, we'll be picking up additional public cloud providers like Azure and Google. And then lastly, there's initiatives that we have in place for the edge out into the extended enterprise network. And this is a term we call remote office branch office, or ROBO. This is an interesting kind of market shift where we're now seeing software-defined branch, as in like a branch site, which could be a regular office. It could be, if you're brick and mortar, those environments are turning to software. So instead of having your physical router, your physical firewall, your applications, they can run all of that in x86. So we have customers that are in production and their customer premise equipment is a server. They have their applications in virtual, they have their next-gen firewall partner, and they'll use the SD-WAN. And SD-WAN is a router replacement. So they can go completely software for hundreds and thousands of remote sites. And then the solution we have for this is management's all centralized. So you use NSX Manager and vCenter for all those locations. There's been a couple of talks this week about remote office, branch office. We're also getting ourselves into IoT. There's an internal project called Pulse. It's been driven by Ray O'Farrell's team in the CTO office. But this is some effort where NSX will be protecting the IoT gateways. So we're working with that team to provide a way to insert NSX in that environment and protect the flows coming in and out of the IoT gateway. So more to come on this one. So lots of places. We call it NSX everywhere. So we talk about this a lot also in customer conversations, in different speaking engagements. It's an important thing to embrace, which is that when you think of transformation, particularly applying networking and security within virtual, it's a big shift. It's a big change from how you've done things in the past. You don't have the hardware. You're not rack and stacking these devices now. You're running it inside of the kernel, or you're applying it to the edge services gateway. And that shift, there's people in the way. there's process of how you've done things in the past. And what's important is to get over that with things like training, education, do hands-on labs. It's one of the most popular hands-on labs is the NSX one. Do a proof of concept with your sales rep. Look at the demos that we have online. But it's kind of enabling your organization to get kind of past things that have been done before and drive new processes. I mean, Brian explained how he's automating. He's automating just about everything. And so that speed to market, getting things up and running very quickly, you can take advantage of, but after you've kind of embraced that you have to do things differently now because you're not doing it in software. And then you have success. You have kind of this, the culture's changed. You're still using best of class capabilities, but you're now doing it all within a software model that's being run in full operations. Lots of information, lots of content out there, and I encourage you to take a look at a few of these. There's some great vMugs out there for NSX. They're local, so you can find an environment close to your area. There's communities that we promote with communities.vmware.com. Lots of resources here. And also check our blogs out. We have some of our top people contributing to blogs, and you can get a tremendous amount of detail. You can learn about what works. Use the experts and their take on this. And then definitely, we're kind of wrapping up this week, but try a hands-on lab whenever you can. They're quite popular, and we invest in making sure that they really show you how it works, but it's a simple model. I mean, 30 minutes, so Brian, getting it up and running. So, but the tool is a great way to really embrace it. And then I'll mention the training and certification here. We've got thousands of folks that are now trained and certified. So please take advantage of that as well. Okay. Fill out your survey. I'm told to make sure that you guys read the slide and you do your best to fill it out. And that concludes the talk today. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.